we are not alone.
These are supposed to be some of the most verified images of giants.
People who do meditation for 60 days will lengthen their telomeres.
Soon we'll get results, and we'll let you know right here on Beyond Belief. Things seem to be changing in the field of ufology.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
That's priceless.
Isn't that amazing?
Tesla wanted free energy, and look what happened to him.
Plenty of evidence to show that they're real. The real question is how and why.
There were Egyptian hieroglyphs out in the outback of Australia.
In Australia. What are the possibilities? Mars was inhabited, and these were built. We almost can't duplicate today. These are amazing topics. What if there was something like at Area 51 deep underwater?
They were killed by some animal.
Believe me, we're just getting started. I'm George Noory, and we here at Gaia are committed to revealing the truth. Up next, Craig Webb back with us. We're going to talk about the power of dreams, lucid dreams especially, and we'll take your calls. Maybe you can share your dreams with us, and Craig will do a little interpretation for you as well. And welcome back. George Noory back with Craig Webb, a dream and consciousness author, researcher, physicist, inventor, professional educator, performing artist, and an award-winning filmmaker. His life path was set in motion 3 decades ago when he nearly drowned on a whitewater rafting trip and suddenly began recalling up to 10 dreams a day and having lucid dreams and verifiable visions of the future. Since then, he's graduated from McGill University, participated in pioneering dream and consciousness research at Stanford University, a hospital as well in Montreal. Craig, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, George. Doing great.
Tell me, why do we dream?
The why of it, huh? Yeah, that's a big one. Certainly it's really known that dreams come for learning, so we can learn skills. That's sort of proven in the sleep lab. We're actually learning, I guess, mentally, emotionally, but sleep lab research, especially lucid dreaming research, where we can track the physiology of the sleeping body according to the activities that the dreamer is doing, has shown that we're actually, firing the neurons in specific patterns, learning the physical skills. Learning's a big one, learning for sure. Emotional healing is another big one. Creativity, we've talked about that lots. And then probably lots of other reasons. Survival, as a caveman, cavewoman, way back when, it'd be great if you could dream up or somehow know about the dangers that were outside the cave, or when to go out to find food or that kind of thing, or when the seasons would change or where the water was. So survival, I guess, direct things, and probably other reasons too.
Are all dreams associated with the brain or outside of the brain?
Yeah, I would say at least associated with the body, so the brain being part of the body, but a little bit of a subset. So we dream with our whole body. I would say we dream as the earth, and that's like a bit of a stretch, might be a jump for some people, but certainly there's the internet where we're all connected and we dream with and for and about each other. So at least social dreaming happens. But then sometimes we tune into nature, natural events, I guess perhaps things that we can help protect against, or at least know about ahead of time, like some huge tidal waves many dreamers have dreamt about. So we're tuned in. So I think some of the dreams come from the earth, but certainly a lot of the effects and I guess the sleep cycles can be measured directly in the brain.
Tell us a little bit more about how you got involved in dream interpretation and dreams especially.
Yeah, I guess I don't think I've shared this as much with you before. I tell you my story sometimes about my near drowning, where I started suddenly remembering about 10 dreams a day, having lucid dreams, premonitions. But just around that same time, I had picked up a book by Richard Bach, the author.
That's right, Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
I think you've had him on before, right?
Long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of getting, that's interesting. He's talking about, I think the book was Illusions. You can sort of attract objects, and later on in one of his books, he met his, wife-to-be at the time, in dreams above the bed. And I thought, that's neat. Maybe I'll try that. And the first night I tried, I had a lucid dream. I didn't know what to do. I just kind of went into darkness and and got all mixed up, but not bad for a first try. And then from there on, I started exploring these experiences that were coming, but I started researching. So as a physicist, I included some of my science training, noted the data, but then first-person explorer, like I guess many of the listeners, started really going in as what I call a subjective scientist, seeing what's possible, seeing how it could be practical, how could I teach it, that kind of thing.
I mean, and you've never looked back.
Probably not. I think what I've shifted, I don't know if I ever told you also, in those early years, right, when I came back from the Stanford pioneering lucid dream research, where I worked with Stephen LaBerge and other pioneers there, I had the big question, because there was lots of choices for me. I could have been a canoe guide, mathematician, and electrical engineer, lots of things. I said, dear subconscious, dear dreams, maybe I was speaking to life and my own mind and my heart even. What's the best path that'll be the most fulfilling? I can really, serve people with my gifts, unique personal gifts. And then I dreamt of touring the world speaking, I guess, on stages, high schools, that kind of thing. And then also in the second half and with tears. You ever woken up with tears on your pillow just from like beauty and joy, George?
Yeah. I've woken up a little teary-eyed sometimes in my life, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess my interpretation now, at the time I didn't know, but a super beautiful future, so beautiful like tears of joy, where I'm performing music and sharing creatively more as an artist. So I guess over the last decade I've been shifting a little bit of focus from just teaching and writing and my book and everything to creating art. In fact, if you want to celebrate with me, I'm lucky to have this film that was inspired during the pandemic by at least one dream. I would say about 10 dreams if I include all the aspects. But it's been in, I think, 30 festivals, a winner at multiple festivals, honorable mention, etc. So I didn't know it, but I guess some of my art's coming out as filmmaking.
Good for you. And what is this one called?
That's Treasure in a Bottle. People can look it up on YouTube. I think it's available there.
Are you familiar with the new film that just came out on Netflix called Slumberland?
Slumberland, yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. Have you checked it out?
I haven't seen it yet. It's about a little girl, though, in the dream state, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of, this is my rough interpretation, forgive me, all the producers, but it's kind of a more modern version of Inception.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of dreamers are meeting, going to different levels of the dream, using totems to move between different levels, and then influencing waking life directly from things that they, I guess, interactions they do on dream level and things they find out and learn. And it's actually pretty well done. It's with Aquaman. I think his name was Jason Momoa.
Yeah.
The big Spanish actor there, who has an interesting connection with dreams that very few people know. You saw he was Aquaman in the Marvel movies. I think most of the listeners, or many of the listeners, saw that. And the lead song where he meets, I guess, the female lead in there, Amber Heard, was actually a song that was inspired by Bono and given as a gift to Roy Orbison with a big synchronicity. He met him the same night he dreamt for Orbison.
How about that?
He didn't know he was going to be at his concert. And they sort of created a song together, and it was a hit song at the time for Orbison, but it later got into the lead, one of the lead soundtrack songs for Aquaman, so that's kind of fun.
These can people really re-enter their own dreams if you stop and start again?
Yeah, that's pretty common. I guess the listeners know that, especially in the later morning hours. So a tiny bit of science here. We have our sleep cycles throughout the night, circadian rhythms. They're probably around 90 minutes. Depends a little bit on food and exercise and how much you've slept. But let's say roughly 90-minute cycles. And a larger portion of that time, the 90-minute cycle, ends up being stage 1 sleep, so light sleep. And then even a larger portion of the stage 1 ends up being, I guess, dream or visual, let's say plot, journey kind of dreams. So a little tip there for recall, for lucid dreaming tips and techniques, and especially for re-entering dreams, like you mentioned, and for wake-induced lucid dreams. They're called WILDs, W-I-L-D. Those last few morning hours are really the good ones because dreaming minds are so close.
Craig, what about shared dreams? Is that possible?
Yeah, just like Slumberland, where I guess the waking people sort of talk about how they met in different levels of the dreams or Inception or this kind of thing. Absolutely. A lot of time it's shared themes, so I felt to call it mutual theming. In waking life, we have the language that, I see this event from this perspective. I talk on this end of the line here to you and the listeners on this radio here and here or online. And we sort of have our perfect perspective about the same event. In dreams, it'll be more themes, like we might see similar symbolisms, archetypes, people or characters are often there. That's how we can track it with who we dream of. And then the most important thing, if people want to kind of make it practical, is check it out with the person. If it's not going to be too weird, like maybe your boss or something, but if it's just a friend or family, do a quick check-in, an email, a text message. Hey, dreamt of you. Here's a little topic. Any connections with your life? And people will be amazed. They'll find out connections happen weekly or more often if they remember their dreams. Have you ever dreamt pretty clearly or specifically with somebody?
I have not. How about you?
Not yet, right?
Not yet, exactly.
Yeah, that's a little suggestion for you and the listeners. And probably you have, but you just maybe haven't tracked it. And also, we sort of need to see a payoff if we're going to spend time focusing on it. Okay, so that's interesting, but then what? And there can be some pretty interesting payoffs. But you did ask, have I done that? Well, I do that often. I dream for my clients, private clients and students, in lots of different ways. One student had strong fears, as an example, of swimming. I guess I didn't really know too much, but she said she was going to Hawaii. And I didn't know too many details, but all of a sudden in my dream, I'm kind of in these deep waters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of dark, and I'm seeing, is that a log, or maybe it's a shark? And I have the choice to go into fear, but it's a lucid dream. I know I'm dreaming. So I said, no, I choose safety. It's just a log, or it's just some seaweed. Or I just kept choosing away from fear and just feeling peace. And then later, I guess that week, back at class, she said, yeah, I shared the dream. And back at class, she said, I was in Hawaii, I was in the water, and I was slipping into fear. I don't think I want to go any deeper. I don't want to go in. I'm afraid. I don't, and there wasn't even much off the beach. I think she was on the beach still. And then I just kind of went lucid and just said, no, I can do this. And I said, there's no sharks. I'm safe. And she said she went deep over her head, not crazy out in the ocean, but sort of moved through fear. So maybe a little bit of inception, but let's say helpful dreaming.
Would you say, Craig, that dreams are probably some of the most powerful aspects of the human mind?
Yeah, I would say dreaming as the general sense of it. We dream our best life up to, our hopes and dreams for life. That's really powerful. We're focusing on a future probability, right? Or let's say a potential life we could live. Same thing for dreams at night, where I'd say... this is a rough guess right now, not statistics from research, but at least 2/3 of our dreams, or some part of them, is focused on exploring possible futures, sometimes very specific precognitive info that we couldn't really know any other way. And other times just sort of exploring probabilities, like a computer program might run scenarios. So how crucial is that we're kind of dreaming of our future? And then health dreams. That's such a huge, I think for
that's big.
Years or so, the Asclepian temples, people would come and have huge healings all over Greece and Mediterranean. Two aspects or two benefits of the many that dreams can offer. So yeah, huge aspect of life.
What about dreams, Craig, where people then dream of an invention or something in business and they successfully utilize it, whether it's dreaming of the Apple computer or whatever it may be? Does that happen a lot?
Well, it probably happens more than we hear about it.
Yeah.
I try to track these things because then I like to share them, and people say, wow, are you kidding? I think we've shared the one before that Google, which I guess many of our listeners use almost daily probably, actually was sparked, not the company, many years' work, but the spark and the seed, I call it the DNA, came directly in a dream to Larry Page, who was the CEO for many years. So that's a huge thing that we deal with.
What brings the information to the dream? Is there some outside force out there that kind of sends it to us, or what is doing it?
Yeah, good question. I have my guess. I don't think I have the truth. But my guess is that there's a bright future. Let's say if I'm Larry Page, the Google CEO, there's a bright future of a multi-trillion-dollar company now. and then many people who have jobs and lots of, I guess, helpful things in the world with all the different products at Google. So that's kind of incipient or possible in the dreams, and then the psyche tunes into it. He was an undergrad, or I guess something like that at Stanford, so perfect timing for sort of choosing his career path. And I think it sort of called him forward, almost like a calling dream, you know.
What about intuitive dreams, Craig, that people either act on or don't act on, but what generates those?
Like a premonition.
Premonitions.
Telepathic dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little example here is Edgar Cayce, who I think you've heard of.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Listeners, who did like 15,000 readings that were all very accurate. One of the students who was working with him had, a parent come to them, their parent who was deceased, passed the veil, and say, please check in on your sister. She's got some really severe problems in her legs or her shoulders. And the dreamer didn't know anything, but she knew the dreams were important. So she called and checked in. Everything okay with you, sis? And she sort of said yes initially, but then said, well, I did have a little bit of pain in my leg. And she goes, oh boy, because I dreamt it. Do you mind getting a checkup? And they found that she had some strange, I forget what the disease was, but growing toxins that she didn't even know other than a little pain, and certainly the dreamer didn't know about. So we can start to have specific dreams for people. And I think the connection or the reason or the conduit maybe would be the love and sort of protecting against a really unfortunate future in that case.
Can you train to become more intuitive in your dream state?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say even people who just remember dreams, so I guess recalling dreams, having a little voice recorder, writing them down, maybe painting them. Some dancers actually just dance their dreams, so that's fine also, or musicians who turn them into songs. Just doing that, even if we never kind of interpret or look too deep into the research or statistics or anything, is valuable because then we're establishing like the neural pathways for what we would call intuition. Dream recall is pretty much the same as intuition. So just developing recall and getting our dream stories a little clearer in life, writing them down, recording them, that'll actually boost our intuition in waking life too.
Years ago, I used to dream of, let's say I was trying to pursue a certain job or something, and I'd concentrate on the individual who would do the hiring. And, I'd know the person or something like that, and I would go to sleep concentrating on that individual, and within a day or two, that person would call me. And they'd say, George, I got this opening, or I heard you're looking for this or that, and I got it. And I've done that a couple times. What am I doing right?
Well, I think there's a subtle thing there that you might not even be aware of. That it's a good thing for listeners to choose as kind of the first technique or the first step anyway. And that is you're open to it and you kind of have a trust that it works.
Yes.
You tell yourself, oh, I'll just sleep on it or I'll just tune to the person or whatever your wording is. But you have a trust and it's not obvious. Certainly a younger me, and then maybe many others out there, what I call myself a recovering thinkaholic. I make a little joke about my, I guess, pretty intellectual education. But I didn't believe in any of this, didn't think it was possible. I didn't necessarily think it wasn't possible or I wasn't really against it, but I wasn't really super open until I had kind of my near-drowning lucid dreams premonitions. Like, wow. So I think that's a key shift. Is it possible? At least keep an open mind, and that'll allow the information through. And then if you have a stronger trust, the more you work with it and you have success, of course it'll kind of amplify itself. That's cool. So you can get jobs
that way. And obviously it plants the seed in the individual that you're concentrating on somehow.
Yeah. Where a telepathic link, possibly?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what my next question was going to be. Can it be telepathy as opposed to that you do through the dream state?
Yeah, well, we have this movie Inception. Now maybe we're dating ourselves a little bit. 10 to 12 years ago.
Not too bad.
But where they actually sort of inserted, in the Hollywood style here, they inserted an idea in the dreamer without really his conscious knowledge that he was going to, I think, sell the company or something. The same thing for Slumberland. The lead character, the young girl, actually changes her new, I guess, uncle, sort of her surrogate dad, with some amazing adventures in dreamland and helps reconnect him with his true self. So is it possible to connect with waking people in our dreams? Absolutely.
Craig, will science ever catch up to the point where we can discover more about dreams with technology, instruments, or anything like that?
I'd say it's happening. I mean, sometimes it's sort of like in sudden jumps, so we can't necessarily predict what it will be. I guess early on we had the noticing of the rapid eye movements, the REM, and then that sort of ensued all the electroencephalography, the fancy tongue twister, all the EEG recordings of the brain and the brain states. Now we have some pretty common apps. So popular technologies, let's say, you can track your movements at night just by having like a movement iPhone app, or I guess Android. One that's kind of interesting is starting to notice, I guess, our breath. So we can have technology to do this. Have you heard of heart rate variability, George?
Yeah.
So HRV, some people know it as HRV. We didn't really get trained, at least I didn't get trained as a young gent back in school about this, but it's not just that our heart rate changes, but the distance between heartbeat actually has its own cycle also. So they call it the heart rate variability. And it ends up being so crucial for health, for good sleep, for peace of mind. And there's certain, I guess, technologies that can help an awful lot with that, help us go to sleep peacefully. And just a simple one listeners can try, because they might not go out and buy like a biofeedback device today or this week, is what's called the heart breath. It's tied to the HRV. And that is just like about a 3-second inhale and a 7-second exhale. Really allows us physiologically, not just by suggestion, but physiologically helps us tap into deep peace, quietness. A minute, half a minute, or a couple minutes into 10-second breath, 3-second inhale. That can help quite a bit. And technology and statistics have shown it, but we can do it without all the extra gizmos.
What's some of the downside, Craig, in not recognizing your dreams, whether they're intuitive or nightmares or whatever? Is there a downside to it?
There's certainly a downside in missing out on, let's say, beautiful visions or hopeful futures or inventions or songs or maybe help for family, friends, loved ones. If we get to those premonition, let's say, the louder dreams, shocking things, even nightmares, that can be quite a risk in terms of two things. One is we may not, if we're used to getting, so let's say, guidance dreams or inside info, I call it, that can be risky enough, and we might not get enough of it. And then if the actual dream is guiding us away from, like, let's say, a really unpleasant future, it's something that we really want to at least explore, maybe consider following. And if it's easy, if it's simple, just follow it. Example, Stevie Ray Vaughan, the amazing guitarist, who is deceased now. Not too many people know that I think the day before or 2 days before.
Did he die in a helicopter crash or something?
Yeah. And the day before, he was at his own funeral, and they were talking about it, and he was like, and he told someone the dream, so it was proven. But he didn't really draw the connection or think too much about it. But then after the concert, I guess he wanted to get home quick, so there wasn't room in the helicopter, but somebody had just given up their seat and said, okay, I'll go later. I forget if it was his agent or somebody. And he said, great, can I take that seat? And he said, yeah, I guess so, no problem. Unfortunately, the end is now known that the dream came true, and the helicopter, I think, hit the mountain. So,
gosh,
was it a potential dream he could have avoided? Probably, possibly. Very similar for John Lennon, Sparkle Horse. I don't know if you know Mark Linkous. He's a musician. I think we've spoken about Lynyrd Skynyrd before. The whole band crashed, and they had a very clear warning dream about don't get on the plane. So there's some big expensive things happening if we don't follow some of these guidance dreams, especially if they come clear or come a couple times. If we have 2 or 3 of the same one, boy, we better listen.
You better listen indeed. And a lot of people don't listen, Craig. Why not?
Belief systems, just like, another crazy dream. I'm sorry I had that bad nightmare. So that belief system's out there. It's just like garbage or clearing the hard drive. Which sometimes it is. If we had a crazy meal at midnight, probably we don't need to spend too much time interpreting. But if we had a nightmare, maybe don't have the crazy meal at midnight. Still a bit of a message. So I'd say belief system, and then other times people are afraid. Just like, oh my gosh, am I going to cause the future? You know, some people dreamt of, I think your daughter, did she dream of September 11th?
She sure did, though we didn't know what it was, but that's what she had a dream of.
Right, and we don't know ahead of time, but then they're wondering, oh no, if I focus on it, I'm going to cause a plane crashing, or am I going to be guilty? Is it going to... So people go into fear or guilt, which premonitions aren't for that, but it is a natural. So there's different ways that limit it, but of course, as you know, and not necessarily could we have changed September 11th, but some of the smaller events of our lives, we can certainly change, you know, what would have been a, let's say, more probable future. We can steer away from it, and it's been done many, many times. I've seen it plenty. It usually requires some attention and focus, and maybe sometimes letting go of addiction or doing something that's kind of scary, you know, standing up to in front of somebody or spending a little bit of money or something. But then something beautiful, or at least we avoid something beautiful happens, or we avoid something terrible.
In the dream state, can you physically get hurt?
That's a good one. I've had that actual question on email. In fact, I've had some really bizarre ones. So this is very coast to coast. I know you'll like this.
Okay, tell me.
People who've woken up with like scratch marks from being sort of in a dream fight in their dream, but their physical body having scratch marks after, which as a bit of a, let's say, more academic researcher, or I guess popular researcher here, I was a little bit skeptical of it. But when I got 4 or 5, I guess, different reports over a few years of people who had that, and I didn't believe that they were just making it up. You know, why would they make it up? I was like, this is pretty interesting. I can't explain the why of it necessarily. Maybe the mind-body connection sort of has a...
Or were they doing it to themselves?
Yeah. Were they like rolling around in bed, sort of whacking the dresser or something?
Right.
But there's some interesting ones. I think like a long time ago, maybe a decade ago, I shared the story of someone who was having fire dreams. They were sort of dying in a fire, like really bad nightmares for a long time, like, you know, for a year or two of like burning to death. And they would wake up with actual blisters on their legs and such, you know. So is that the mind-body connection? They certainly weren't like overheating the bed, so it wasn't just from lying in bed. Just to end that story and a little empowerment for listeners, it turns out that person did some past life regression, went to hypnotists, and they, you know, in that framework, anyways, they did have a past life where they were burned at the stake, and when they made it conscious, let's say, got in touch with the pain, the sadness, and the immediate death trauma, I guess, they cleared it. All the nightmares went away, and their legs were all healed and fine, like quickly. So it could be something from, let's say, another lifetime that's sort of percolating through right onto our body. So it's a bit of a weird one, but I've seen some variations of that.
What is your definition, Craig, of a nightmare, and what would cause that?
Yeah, I have a few classes or categories of nightmares. And sometimes we use different language. So if they're talking to children, they might say, oh, that was a bad dream. Oh, you mean a nightmare? No, just a bad dream. Or they might not even use the word bad, you know. So just watch the language a little bit. But, you know, the mare is the horse, the kind of dark horse that would come after us, I think connected with some engravings by Raphael a few hundred years ago. That comes in the night, kind of attacking the poor dreamer. That's kind of the out there model. I'm more in the far side model of what a nightmare is, and that is, yes, maybe it's a giant, hideous insect outside, Edna, but maybe it's a giant, hideous insect outside in need of help. Maybe we should let him in, talk to him, and help them. So some of the dreams come as warnings or maybe healings or something like that, the insect that could turn into, let's say, a butterfly. Some of the nightmares or upsetting dreams are more physiological, a medication we took, if we had certain drugs, obviously. Sometimes like just food, which sort of is drugs, like weak drugs, different foods, vitamins and things, can trigger that. And then, of course, we talked about the precognition. We're tuning into a really unfortunate future, maybe a world event or maybe a more private event. And it's usually important to listen and notice the difference a little bit. When they're really clear or vivid, that's a pretty good sign. If we have it twice, that's usually a pretty good sign. And then the last category of nightmares, George, is just for people who've gone in big trauma, like war vets, car crash victims, etc. and they'll have more of just like repeating. Let's say part of their presence, their emotional awareness is caught in the past a little bit from a terrible, terrible experience. So it's a little different class, but they overlap.
Are nightmares good things or are they bad?
Yeah, people should check out my article that's gone around the world a few times. Nightmares? Lucky you. Mostly, we can turn them into positive things, but it's a bitter medicine. Obviously, nobody wants to keep having nightmares all the time. But if we take it as kind of the warning or the guidance, or let's say the message that we shouldn't have that diet, or maybe something as simple as that we have some trauma to heal from, even like a strong breakup, a terrible divorce that we weren't present for, certainly anything more serious, physical trauma, I guess abuse, that kind of thing. It's still an important message, maybe not to interpret, but we'll get some therapy, some healing, some hypnosis, or something to move through it. So part of our psyche doesn't keep like pushing, kind of like a little alarm or bell going, nightmare, 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 sort of like an oil light on the car. There's a problem. If you get the problem at the nightmare level, that'd be good. But if you don't address it, in 4 years, 5 years, you might get cancer. So I don't want to freak out listeners, but strong recurring nightmares, especially like demonic level dreams, like really scary ones, can turn into pretty severe body sicknesses within a few, 5-10 years. So be careful and better address it early before it gets physical.
Craig, why would a child have a nightmare?
Yeah, or even night terrors, right, George?
Or night terrors, that's right.
Which not all people name the difference or know the difference. They come in a different stage of sleep usually, and they're a little bit different as they're actually experienced. But some of the results are similar. The children can have nightmares just from tough things at school, sort of life events that they haven't emotionally integrated. Often invisible things to the parents, like they're just feeling upset about some kind of family stuff with the family at home, or maybe they're missing somebody on Christmas, a friend from school, but for them it's a hugely important thing, so upsetting dream. Obviously trauma, like the other ones, could come and have the nightmare. But in the night terrors class, that's a little different. This is an empowering research that I find, and I don't think I've really shared anywhere with anybody, so I hope the listeners can take the benefit, and maybe some researchers can pick this up, because I haven't had time to do some statistics on it. But when the temperature of a child's room is too warm, usually too warm, or at least different than normal, there can be more like spontaneous night terrors.
More warmer than colder?
Yeah, like too many sheets on, or in the summer, this kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
It's really humid. So a little fan, a window open, or just to be aware of it. We can usually shift it, but if we're not aware of it, it just kind of keeps coming. So if usually parents see their children with night terrors, and the parents are more freaked out than the kids. The kids don't usually remember much. Just check around temperature a little bit. Make sure you have sleep hygiene, which means kind of a little ritual that helps them get peacefully to bed. And then if it keeps recurring, maybe explore a little deeper. It might be like, I think you know that story of James Leninger, right, George?
The little kid about the thought he was a World War II pilot?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the one, the Corsair pilot from World War II.
That's right. He knew that the tires would bust upon landing too hard, and nobody knew that at the time, but he did.
Yeah. And actually, by the end of that, people can watch I think it's the segment on YouTube. There's all variations. But by the end of the series, he actually named the place on the plane where the Japanese had hit his plane when it went down.
Mm-hmm.
And they found his sister and got pictures of him. And they said that's the exact... Oh, and they found his flying mate who was on that mission. They said that's the exact place where, the last thing we saw was that the bomb, or the anti-aircraft hit him right on the plane on that side. Something nobody could really ever know. So it could be something percolating in from, let's say, other lives in that framework, which is a bit hard to track, but still worth treating.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
I find that stuff amazing. In fact, my experience more and more now, because I've been learning about it, is under about the age of 6, so there is a pretty specific age there, around 5, 6, 7, children are pretty tuned with, let's say, previous lives. And if they're having something upsetting go on, even just like little stories, not necessarily like at night, might be worth sort of just checking in with them like a little bit more about the story and seeing. In fact, there's an amazing, amazing, amazing movie In fact, I found out just, I think, 2 weeks ago that it's free on YouTube, so listeners can check it out here, maybe holiday viewing. Have you heard of Yesterday's Children, George?
Yesterday's Children. I have not.
Not very known. It's very little known. It was a book called Once Upon a Time or something like that. But the TV or the movie is with Jane Seymour, who's a pretty good actress. And it talks about a woman. I won't give it away too much, but the general plot is a woman who actually dreams these very specific buildings and street names and all these things. And she's kind of like, at first, whatever. But then she draws them and then does some research and finds out it's a little town in Ireland, and more, and she gets into it that her children, she promised her children she'd sort of support and keep them together, and unfortunately she passed on in some previous life, and now she's like a young woman in America who travels to Ireland and meets her very aged children in real life, physical life, and she described the streets and the specifics of the town and the architecture perfectly in her drawings and her dreams. So some pretty interesting, like actual true stories that have some pretty good proof in them about, let's say, reincarnation and young dreams that come through.
Craig, what's the latest book you have? The Dreams Behind the Music?
Yeah. Well, The Treasure in the Bottle is my latest creative work, which is the film. People can
right.
check it out free on YouTube. But yeah, The Dreams Behind the Music. Before that, Dreams and Dying, Benefits for the Living and the Dying. But Dreams Behind the Music is doing very well, George. I guess maybe artists are getting inspired here. Songwriting and creative inspiration from dreams. So that's a big one. And I keep having musical dreams. I think I sent Tom some sound clips. I don't know if you're going to play them there today. But some of my latest dream inspirations from music. In fact, there's a Christmas melody, a very sort of holiday-sounding one. I haven't put lyrics to it yet, but have you ever dreamt music like that, George?
I have not dreamt music, no, not at all, but that would be fascinating. So, Craig, tell us about daydreaming, that so-called phrase. What is that?
Yeah, well, probably different people use it a little bit different ways. But there's certainly altered states that happen in, let's say, our daytime hours, more or less waking time. It's not exactly waking time because we're daydreaming. But we can start to tune into, let's say, non-physical perceptions, which happens all night while we dream. But we can start to tune in also to some of what's called, I think Seth framed it originally, called the inner senses. Jane Robertson said.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But let's say we can start to tune into clairvoyant things at a distance, or like telepathic things that other people are thinking that we couldn't really know about any other way. Or we can start to tune into things that might be in the future or past in some of these daydreams. Or just simply creative states. Some artists, in fact probably many good artists, are able to enter a bit of a deeper state, like daydreaming or, let's say, creative absorption. Sometimes eyes closed, depending, and enter into a state where they get like amazing creative inspiration, sort of like dreams, I guess. I think Pharrell is one. You know Pharrell, To Be Happy, our musical artist. He would actually see colors and visual music, sort of sees it, and then he crafts it into the mixes. And he says he sits in the studios, kind of daydreams with his eyes closed to be able to do that. So lots of different things that can happen in that state. It could be tied with déjà vu. Have you had that before?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Constantly, Craig. How about you?
Oh, constantly. I don't think I have it constantly. I definitely get it from time to time. And there's also a few classes or, let's say, aspects of déjà vu. Déjà visité, being back in a place that we know we've been at before. Déjà vécu, so there's slight variations on it. But tuning in across time, maybe remembering a dream, something we've experienced, we know what the person's going to say and that kind of thing. When you have it, is it you know what's going to happen next, or what exactly?
You just feel strange. As a matter of fact, I got checked out years ago by a doctor because some doctors think it's temporal lobe epilepsy.
With epilepsy, yeah.
But it's a weird sensation. I think déjà vu is the multiverse scenario where these things are happening in another universe and we're picking up on it because it's still us.
Right. Like maybe even at the time that we have like a clear déjà vu, it's maybe an important choice point between possible or probable futures. Richard
Exactly.
one details that really well. He shows that he might have died if he hadn't followed this like deja vu that he had. So it's interesting that you have that same experience too.
Of all the dreams that are out there, the different kinds, is there one that is more important than the other?
Probably for each person there is. I love the creative dreams and musical dreams. I guess certain people will love dreams. I can tell you a big one, especially now during the holidays, is reminiscence dreams or missing deceased loved ones or maybe people at a distance. And for some people that brings incredible comfort. I can tell you a really amazing dream in a second. And for some people that'll bring like upset and sad, sort of missing, longing, wish it was kind of, sense. So it's not necessarily either way for people, but that they would say that that's kind of valuable. Then obviously we spoke about the nightmares or let's say warning dreams being really important. I would say possibly the most important is vision dreams or calling dreams, something that's...
What are those?
Something we wake up that's usually pretty clear. We have a strong emotional sense, mostly positive when it's called a vision. But it's usually very vivid. Sometimes we sort of tune into things and perceptions like the grass was even more, quote-unquote, real than in waking life, or the smell was brilliant, and I can normally not really smell things. And then the event ends up being something like a possible future. I would say many of the artists who, in my book, Dreams Behind the Music, who got music, that was sort of probable visions of the future, or at least auditory I guess picking up on the future and future songs that could be huge hits, and then they crafted them after. So that's a huge thing. If we miss out on our calling dreams and maybe the important path that could really bring us fulfillment and bring out our gifts, that's going to be really expensive for our long-term joy. So my guess is slower or less obvious and subtler, but the most important are maybe the calling dreams.
What about people who believe that their loved ones who have died visit them in the dream state? Is that really happening?
Yeah, I have a great actual anecdote that I just heard last night because we did a gathering, a solstice gathering here for one of my teleclasses, and one of my, star dreamers here, he might even try to call in, and he said it was fine for him to share.
What's his first name? Just because I'll know.
So maybe if he's on...
Is he in New Orleans?
No, he'll be from Minnesota, I think Duluth.
Minnesota, okay.
He comes in there. Anyways, if he doesn't get through, I can sort of share his story because it's a really powerful one. He worked at a hospital before, now he's retired. But one of his colleagues who still works there had, very tough. She'd lost her son, I think, maybe a year or two ago. Parents should never outlive their kids.
Oh, no, that's the worst.
So she hadn't really grieved it, which is understandable. I don't pretend to be a mom and try to tell somebody, oh, just grieve it, get over it. No, it's like deep, And then I guess her father had started getting pretty sick, for a little while. And she was trying to get to Florida to get to his, to reach him before maybe he passed on. And then my friend here, or my student, I guess also my friend, had this powerful dream. So that's kind of the backstory. He says he's at work. He's kind of on the phone, but there's lots of noise, and the staff is talking, so he can't hear, so he moves down the hall. And then this person comes on and says, hi, I'm the, I'll just say the name B, so we'll say Bernie to kind of respect the privacy. So Bernie says, I'm Bernie here, and I have somebody who really wants to talk to you. This is my dreamer friend, who's a pretty good medium and dreamer. And so somebody comes on with a deep voice and says, hi, please tell my girl that I was at the funeral. I saw her, even though she couldn't see me, and that I'm fine. The pain's gone now. Yes, I passed on, but it's good here, and I feel safe and glad, and thanks for all the love. And he thanked the dreamer. Please pass this along. And the dreamer said, I sort of got that his name was either Jerry or Gerald or something like this. But anyways, so he checked with the person who he thought it was about because the son's name was the same, right? And she said, well, that's pretty interesting. Sounds like he's kind of reaching and comforting me. The thing that freaked me out the most is you got the name exactly. In fact, his actual name was Gerald, but everybody would call him Jerry.
Ah.
So perfect hit. Let's say 1 in, 1,000. How many names are out there? 1 in 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
Getting it exactly right. not proof, science, kind of hardcore proof, but certainly emotionally she said she felt incredibly comforted and that her son and I guess her deceased dad are okay. And it was okay that she didn't make it on time because he's there and he saw her and she didn't need to feel guilt. So is it an actual visitation? Doesn't really matter if she felt the peace and the kind of comfort, I'd say.
Craig, thanks again. Keep in touch. Have a great Christmas, okay?
Okay, Melika Likimaha and Joyeux Noel to everybody out there.
That's Craig Webb, our expert on dreams. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladessor, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Binnall, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.